Whiskey Cast. Brought to you by Redbreast, the definitive single pot still Irish whiskey. Those in the know Redbreast.
Blood, sweat and tears will get you there. But joy will take you further.
If there's a wine associated with whiskey, it has to be sherry. Sherry cask matured whiskies are found all over the world, and the names are almost as familiar as those of our whiskies. Names like Fino, Oloroso, Manzanilla, Amontillado, and Pedro XIMENEZ. But just what do those names mean, and how did they become such a part of the whiskey world? To answer the question, we have to go to Spain's Sherry Triangle, the coastal region in Andalusia where authentic sherry is made. The towns of Sanlúcar de Barrameda, El Puerto de Santa Maria, and the most well-known, Jerez de la Frontera, make up the borders of the Sherry Triangle. They've been making wine here since the days of the ancient Phoenicians, but it was the Muslims who gave Jerez and sherry their names.
That is an important point that we must know, the history of this region, the Phoenicians, Romans, and after, obviously, the Muslims who lived in the area and who give to the name of Jerez city, the town, Xeres. And that is the name of that we know nowadays as sherry.
Sherry is a fortified wine, meaning alcohol is added after the wine has been fermented. The extra strength helps the wine stand up not only to the hot Spanish sun, but to travel.
After Columbus discovered America, many investors from Europe came to the south of Spain, to the south of the south, and them want to win money by the Atlantic Ocean, and they find a fantastic place for agriculture and with an incredible climate and a really good raining season during the whole year, and that was an important place for produce grape, and then have a really good production that they age in the wineries and then export. And that wine at the beginning need to be fortified to be protected by the transport. For that reason appeared the sherry that we know nowadays.
The wine comes from 3 different types of grapes, mainly Palomino Fino, along with Muscatel and Pedro XIMENEZ, but after that it gets complicated. Sherries aren't classified by age, but by when they're fortified and whether the wine matures under a layer of yeast to keep oxygen out. For instance, Fino and Oloroso start out the same, but Finos are matured under that layer of yeast, while Olorosos are allowed to oxidize. Amontillado? It combines the best of both.
After 5 years stay aging with the yeast, we kill the yeast with alcohol. We added alcohol to the barrels, and the wine oxidate. And we sell Amontillados with minimum of 12-15 years.
While sherries are generally sweet and fruity, each different style has its own characteristics that carry over when a cask is later used to mature whiskey.
You get the sherry theme, but you get different flavor deliveries, right from light succulent berry type fruits through to the heavier, going to dried fruits like raisins, sultanas, and then you can pick up then the heavier, more, I would call them earthy type notes like walnuts, almonds, even pipe tobacco, for example. So there's a huge spectrum of flavour characteristics that whiskey from an ex-sherry cask can deliver.
Billy Layton of Irish Distillers teamed up with his counterparts at Bodegas Lustau in Jerez to create Redbreast Lustau Edition. It's finished in casks seasoned with Lustau's Oloroso sherry.
It's not that we've just found that Oloroso is the one that works for us. It's well established that Oloroso is the one that works for us. So we have set up our own supply chain to kind of fund our own demand for Oloroso, and we have got, I can hold my hand up and say we have got some of the best Oloroso sherry casks that anybody anywhere in the whiskey world has.
How did sherry get its connection to whiskey? Well, history gives some of the credit, or the blame, to Sir Francis Drake's naval assault on the Spanish Armada at Cadiz in 1587. He seized an estimated 3,000 casks of sherry and sent them home to England. The British discovered the wine, and sherry became one of the most popular wines in Great Britain. Back in the day, casks like these would leave Jerez de la Frontera and be shipped all over the world full of sherry. When they got to Scotland and Ireland, they usually wound up being used for maturing whiskey. But a few years ago, the Spanish government changed its laws. Now, sherry has to be exported in bottles only, no bulk shipments. And that dried up a lot of the supply of good sherry casks. Since the bodegas value vintage casks for their Soleras, older sherry casks are rarely available. Today, most whiskey makers work directly with cooperages in the Sherry Triangle. They have casks made to order from Spanish and American oak staves supplied by sawmills in the north of Spain. Here, most of the work is still done by hand. American cooperages making bourbon barrels can crank out around 2,000 a day. In Jerez, it's more like 500 a week, and almost all of them will find their way to a whiskey distillery sooner or later.
About 90% for whiskey industry and 10% for different regions. Jerez, Rioja, Ribera del Duero, and for example in Japan for sake, but in general for whiskey industry.
The cooperages also handle the task of placing these barrels with bodegas to be filled with sherry for seasoning. Not all of the bodegas are willing to do it, because it means investing in wine that may only be used for a couple of years before the barrel is emptied. At Lustau, the Oloroso sherry goes from the seasoning casks straight into the SOLERA system, while the casks will go on to their ultimate destination, and perhaps their ultimate purpose, maturing the whiskies we'll be drinking years from now. For more cask-strength conversation on whiskies, with the people who make them and the people who drink them, join us each week for Whiskey Cast. In Jerez de la Frontera, Spain, I'm Mark Gillespie.